Well, I got some things to say. This is the A to Z podcast.
Yeah.
I'm Zach Jackson. My friend sometimes is Andre Knott. You can find us at A to Z podcast.com, at facebook.com/A to Z podcast, on social media at Dre Knott and at Akron Jackson. And right here, finally, after the worst spring break ever, on the A to Z podcast. Welcome back, my friend.
Thank you. Oh, you just said something that particularly threw me off. Am I sometimes your friend or sometimes Andre Knott?
You're always Andre Knott, which is why you're only sometimes my friend.
I was just trying to figure it out. I just wanted to get that right. I was like, all right, am I sometimes? I understand. It has been one of the weirder spring breaks of A to Z. Thank you guys for all your patience. We did miss you. We missed you so much. I was willing to go on the radio and actually do radio stuff. I went on with Nick Camino and actually did a show for I did a show. I'll leave that as it is. Got a lot to say. How's Texas and Alabama going to treat you this year?
Well, yeah, let's just start there. So the story is out now. Kind of when the Browns hired Freddie Kitchens. As you guys know, I work for The Athletic. Their mantra is to go get the story and the real story, not the one that everybody else has or not the 5-second version. So basically within a day and a half, I was on a plane to Gadsden and Atala, Alabama. I fly into Birmingham. I had never been to Northeast Alabama, Northern Alabama, period. Spent several days there finding Freddie's friends and coaches and cohorts and those who watched him, kind of painting the picture. Came home for a day and a half, started putting it together. In that day and a half, we didn't have a window, and the only time we could have done A to Z was the morning of the conference championship games, and we thought that would be a waste because we would obviously talk about those. So doing one then wasn't going to work. The morning after the conference championship games, I was back on a plane to Southern Alabama where I was at the Senior Bowl this week. It was kind of a strange Senior Bowl experience, for one, for not covering the Browns when they have 4 of the first 35 picks, and for two, the second day of practice was rained out. So really I saw limited in terms of in-person exposure. I'm DVRing the practices today, but I just, within the hour, arrived back in Ohio, back here in the studio, and I'm talking to you, my sometimes friend, Andre Knott.
Yeah. A lot goes into that, and I'm glad you kind of told the background of why you went about doing that. I know that something about you writers, man, you and Zach Meisel, I know Zach listens to the podcast. I consider both of you, one more of a friend than the other, but both of you are my friends. You're the two asshole Zachs that I know. Sometimes in the A to Z podcast, words get said that you don't want to hear around your kids, or you don't want Uncle Andre to tell them the first time what it means. So if you're in a place that you can't listen to those type of words, turn it up and let everybody really know how people talk. But you're not as bad as this. You're not like this as much as Zach Meisel is. But I'm a big fan of both of yours. And for the first time, I had Zach, like, basically telling me, hey, asshole, don't let people know where I'm at. I'm not trying to let this story break before everybody else has it. I kind of like that competition of writing, of doing something different. And like you said, everybody can go to the press conference, ask the same 15 questions, get the same quotes, maybe make a phone call or two that's different, but the same story basically gets published. You didn't do that. It was a fun article to read. Zach Meisel, same way. Like, and I'm always like, I can help you with stories. I'm not your competition. Stop trying to hide the little secretive things you're doing for me, but asking me. So you two athletic writers are funny, but this is the first time for you, and I know why, but you wanted to keep this one close to the vest because you wanted to do it right. For people, because there's younger guys on here that listen, that are in college. When you're trying to put a story together like that, and of course you got hit 'em up style like Tupac, the dude from ESPN got you. You guys both come out at the same time with two completely different stories, but they kind of connect, and I'll get to why I think that later. Just go to the mindset of what you're trying to piece together when you know you're going to someone's hometown to not write an obit about them, but you're trying to find out as much as you can and make it informative, but also make a story that people will want to read and want to share. Yeah,
I mean, I would start by saying this, Trey, that the reason that it's cool to work on these, and this one, was every bit of 2 weeks from start to finish, and involved, people offering suggestions and edits and asking questions, why this and not that, is because in today's sports environment, so much is between those walls. Like you mentioned, the press conference, the 15 minutes after the game, all that stuff. So many of these guys that have been in it, they know how to give those answers. They have maybe people or things they keep close, but it's hard to pry those things out. So what you're doing is diving back. I mean, Freddie hasn't lived in Gadsden or gone to high school in Atala in 27 years, right?
Right.
So I'm going back and I'm asking, I'm a stranger asking for people's time and for their insights. And I'm trying to really paint a picture. I'm dealing with people who aren't buttoned up, buttoned down, polished, used to doing this. So sometimes it's hard to get things out of them, especially you being a stranger. Sometimes they maybe say too much. And I can tell you what I'm most excited about is there was so much there in the 3.5-ish days that I was actually in his hometowns. I got 50 stories that I can't possibly write until I ask Freddie whether they're true or not, or add some detail,
That's all. And that's going to be awesome though for you going forward. So to have that.
Yeah. So you just the AD at his old high school was phenomenal. I basically called him, said, if I come to town, could you help me out? He brought people to the school. He introduced me to other people. I just Googled and white paged and whatever, found other names, other friends, Facebook message, reached out, said, this is what I'm doing. Could you have time to talk? So some of them were on the phone. A number of them were in person, driving around the town. I drove about 45 minutes outside of the town to go to dinner with someone who had covered Freddie at Alabama, who had written a story later. And then you just try to kind of tie it all together. And then the thing is like, okay, the reason I'm going there and not doing it all by phone is because I want to have that personal feel. I want to see. But you go there and it's this old steel mill town and people's dads worked at the Goodyear plant or worked in the coal mine. But now, Dre, there's a new Walmart and a new Publix. There's not people dying in the coal mine every hour, right? So now you're working that balance between. I mean, look, it was rural Alabama, but for me to sit here and say or write that they were banjos playing or it was backwoods as shit, that would just be a lie. It wasn't. I stayed in the Hampton Inn in front of the Ruby Tuesday in front of the Cracker Barrel half mile off the highway. The old school downtown was there, and the stadium you could tell had been there, which that's me. That's awesome. And people were really just like, Freddie Kitchens was the greatest baseball player we've ever seen. Freddie Kitchens was a popular super jock who was the stud of everything, but he wasn't an asshole about it. His buddies said, hey, yes, we drank cold beers on the weekends, but we were all about sports. We competed in golf and in Tecmo Bowl and in baseball. And sure, Freddie always almost won, but he was a normal guy. He was all of this. So especially because his father passed away a few years ago, and especially because in a couple cases I had guys in their 70s telling me stories of 20 to 30 years ago. Awesome. You got to do some digging. You can't just run with it. So it's really cool.
It was, and you used the key word that I think the one thing that he's already connected with. You use the word normal, and normalizing him, and a lot of times it's very difficult to do that with people nowadays because we glorify and put him so far ahead. And I think the reason he's liked so much is because he's normalized himself. He normalizes himself to the billionaire owner. He normalizes himself to the custodian. I got a story I can't even tell, but I'll tell you when we're done because I don't want it out there. It's not even a bad one, but it's just I would be telling on someone that works in the building and that, and it's not I'll explain it to you later. But normalizing a person and finding ways to normalize them. As we're talking, I just got done being with my dad, and I sent this story over to my dad because my dad's not from the same part of Alabama that Freddie Kitchens is from, but he's from Alabama. He remembers Freddie Kitchens as a quarterback better than you or I because my dad's one of the biggest Alabama fans you'll ever meet.
Right.
And as I read that story, and the connection that I really took from the story that you wrote is that, and I know this because this is my family, this is my life, as rural and as different as Alabama is, the same characteristics that most Northeast Ohioans love about the close-knit, part of sports and family are the same in Alabama as they are in Northeast Ohio. To me, when you're talking about his old high school field, I know what those fields look like. I've been there with my dad. It's like going to Manchester High School. So for you, I even texted you last week. I was like, oh, you're at home. Like you're at home, but it's just different. You can get caught up in the Southern twang and things like that. But a lot of people from that area have the same characteristics that we love here in Northeast Ohio. And I think that's why Freddie's worked here so far and hopefully it can continue that way. That was the fun part of the story for me, that I was able to connect it to my dad, who's from there, and I was able to say, Dad, read this, even though it's from Jackass Zac. He did a pretty good job this time.
Well, I mean, on the podcast, we play Glory Days presented by American Fireworks, and I felt like I was just in a 10-day of living Glory Days episode, because that's how they talked about Freddie. One thing that was really cool at the school, they have a room where they keep yearbooks and other like files and folders and pictures, just anything they can collect, for over 100 years. Now, the unfortunate thing is they were only missing 3 yearbooks, and 2 of the 3 were his last 2 years. So that sucked. But they had that room where it was just all of this stuff where you could appreciate the history, and then they had some of the bigger things that are actually visual that you don't want to stuff in a room, kind of strewn throughout the library, starting on one side from 100 years ago and coming back to the other side to more modern times. And I'm talking leather jackets and football helmets, but also like school books and pictures and all sorts of things. So that, it really was like that small town feel. And while I was in there, it was just the athletic director, who I'd known for all of 40 minutes, taking me to the library, where I met these ladies for 40 seconds. And they're like, well, we don't have this, but they immediately knew someone's name whose mom graduated, whose sister graduated in that year. Like, we'll make a call for you. We'll do this, And so that was just
really cool.
Really cool. And then of Freddie's old teammates and closest friends and all that, half of them still lived in the area, maybe not there. One was the AD at one of the neighboring high schools, but some of them were elsewhere, and it was like they passed along the phone numbers or just the correct spelling of the name so I could look the person up on Facebook, and I just went and started doing that. And then one thing that I found that was able to kind of tie it all together, Freddie was a big time football recruit, and he had a disappointing career, I guess, as related to that. Because we think Alabama now, we think national power. Well, Gene Stallings was at the end of his career. He played for 4 coordinators, which is the obvious Browns tie. He tore his pec playing baseball, which obviously pissed Coach Stallings off and cost him a year of football, all of that. But to tie it all together, this guy, and this is just from Googling, actually sitting in the airport on the way down there, in this small town Alabama newspaper, had written a story about how he covered Freddie, and he joked with him 22 years ago about how playing for all these coaches would get Freddie ready for his coaching career. And then the same guy had gotten back in touch with Freddie 6 or 7 years down the road, and they had talked when Freddie was coaching. And because Alabama was in this Browns-like cycle of going through all these things, he said, maybe this will spin back to you. Like maybe in 2015, you'll be ready to be a head coach and you'll come back to Alabama. And Freddie told him, I think more like 2019. Just a joking conversation,
How hilarious is that?
Yeah, and so I found this guy, and we went to dinner, and I said, okay, I just wanted to hear this, and hear some Freddie stories and hear about the area. So then when I got home, I called him and I said, I just want to put you on the record for 5 minutes. And we talked. And that's when he said, the other day I ran across a picture at the press conference, and he goes, I thought the rumpled ball cap with the suit was the most Freddie Kitchens thing ever. And I'm just sitting here at my kitchen table just dying laughing because that's him. And so, look, guys, we can transition into the Seth article and the whole overall picture by saying this. After Hugh Jackson, it's real easy to be human. It's real easy to be likable.
True.
And a lot of good guys have come to the Browns and failed.
Yeah.
Mike Pettin was a good guy. Chud was a good guy. I didn't ever think much of Pat Shurmur as a football coach, but he was good to me in our few experiences. So, none of this matters in September. But I think you basically have a Clevelander that just happened to grow up 800 miles south, and he grew up like you did, everything except smashing beers in the Muni lot.
Right. And how does Nike not somehow get those Dogtown sweatshirts and refurbish them and put them out?
Yeah.
Like seriously, that's do they understand? I'll buy one and wear one. And I don't buy nothing. All my clothes are for free, or I get somebody to hook me up.
Dre, I will say this: it does seem like a miss, and I do think they'll sort it out. I think sometimes the NFL licensing agreements are so stringent; it's not as easy as print.
You're right.
10,000 more of these.
You're right.
But
but you're right. You're at what Zac just said about clothing in baseball, basketball, football. The rules are so weird and odd, but it's business. but they've got a home run, and you don't sit on home runs. And as the old saying goes, you play the hits. That sweatshirt is a freaking hit, like no other one out there. I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, that's the best sweatshirt I've seen of the Browns. Now everybody's going to want DP sweatshirts. That's a good way to go into the other story.
Better than DIP, right?
Yeah. I mean, you know what? Like, we didn't learn a ton from the ESPN story, and it's just how life works. That your story comes out today, and it's completely different than what that story was. And I will say for the ESPN guy, he did good research. He obviously got a lot of people that probably are no longer getting paid by the Browns to speak and tell of some of the oddness that has gone on in that building. I think if you've listened to this podcast, and this isn't about patting ourselves on the back, I don't think when you read that anything came like you were like, oh my God, you pretty much knew most of it. I still will say, and I'm going to say this carefully because I'm not trying to start the year making enemies left and right.
Too
you
late.
Still should fuck them. It's still at the end of the day, you have an owner that hasn't proven that he can prudently step to the side and let people that he's hired do their jobs. It's funny. Like, I kept thinking as I read this, it's amazing that this guy, when he fired Hugh Jackson, who when you read the story, he should have never hired him, should have been fired him before it came down to it. But he was talking about all this in-house fighting, and it's like the culprit of all of this in-house fighting, and this isn't news to any of us, but he's kind of the culprit of why everything has been the way that it's been in Berea since he's come there. And you can run everybody out of the building, but if the same problem keeps occurring, and sooner or later you got to look at who the common denominator is. And it's him. And I'm not saying all the because let's be the one thing I would take back against this guy that wrote it is I would say, okay, Jimmy Haslam has failed pretty well as a Browns owner, but he didn't walk into the perfect scenario or situation either. There was some broken culturally. There wasn't a culture when he bought it, right? Like, there was no way to and I think that's always, and I'm defending him here. He had a tough thing that he walked into. Has he helped it much? That's, for you guys to figure out and for you guys to answer. Hopefully with what he's done by bringing in Dorsey and having a guy like he has with Freddie Kitchens helps. But at the end of the day, the common denominator is still there. And at any day or any moment, he can pick up and start hitting switches and changing things if he's not comfortable. And I think as a fan of that team, that's something that you have to be cognizant of.
I think you're exactly right. And 2 points I want to make here. I'm trying to decide which one first. Let's start with this. You brought that up, Dre, as we talked the coaching search, right? The early stages before Freddie Kitchens was a factor, even a thought, not just to us, to John Dorsey, right? You said it is different this time at the core level. You do have Dorsey in place. You do have Mayfield in place. You have other guys. You're still worried about the owner getting too involved, about the owner getting caught up, getting on all those. And those are legit concerns because those are real. Because he's been in charge 6 years now, and there is this track record that was laid out today. I understand the angst / frustration / question of why now for this? Why did this have to come out? There's not a whole lot new. Why are you rubbing our noses in it? Although I think that's a valid question. They're presenting Seth Wickersham, who is one of America's best writers. He has been for a long time. Is just saying, hey, as the Browns go forward, this is the past that they have to shed. It's not a little bit bad. It's been really bad, and there's been a common denominator here. So I think we can all move past that without getting too up in arms and say, well, all of that stuff in that story, except for Hugh Jackson, clown show of clown shows, is pre-John Dorsey and Baker Mayfield, right? And if Baker Mayfield is even 80% of what he showed us this year, then it would take extraordinary, even by Haslam standards, extraordinary measurements for anyone to get in the way of what happens on the field, right? And then that's not to crown them Super Bowl champs or even division champs. That's to say, as a football team, having the right guys in the right positions and having a chance to win week in, week out, and year out, you almost can't screw that up, at least in this short window that you're looking at now that looks 10 times brighter. And so the way I would sum this up is to say this. every year as we've gone through this, and they've sucked for a long time, guys. They haven't had a winning record in 12 years now. Every year, Dre, I have said in some form or fashion, well, as this team begins its journey each September, history really doesn't matter. We know what it is. We know what it's been. We know it's been hurt by the constant change, by not drafting the right guys, by some of the internal bullshit. And really, Seth Wickersham laid out a whole bunch of majoring in the minor, which we're not to victory lap this, but we've been telling you that, right? Each year that hasn't mattered, but the same things have popped up. The same problems have been. So it's on John Dorsey and Baker Mayfield, the two most important people in the organization. Then you take the step to Freddie Kitchens and the other guys to just keep getting better and live in their day-to-day, week-to-week, worry about the big things. And then suddenly the little things are the little things. The minor things are the minor things. And the marketing and the what about me and all the little shit that's gone on, and they still have a lot to clean up. But all that is so far from mattering or from any conversation at all when the product on the field is good.
Product on the field is good, changes everything. We all know that. I didn't hear the interview, but I heard the hysterical question of, why don't you guys do the type of things on the Steelers? I'm going to tell you, Browns fans, something. Stop worrying about the Steelers until you actually play them. That's a terrible question because they're a winning franchise. They win games. And it's funny. I don't know if I read this in The Athletic or where I read this, but when Chuck Noll was hired as the head coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers, a writer, and it's kind of, to me, this will be the perfect segue as we can go wherever you want to go. We can talk about the AFC Championship or Super Bowl matchup, whatever. But a writer asked Chuck Noll, for you youngsters out there and don't realize this, Chuck Noll, when he became the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Pittsburgh area was thought of as a loser town. The writer asked him, what does he think and how can he change the loser's mentality, and how would he basically asked him, why would he take a job in this town full of losers? And Chuck Noll scoffed at that guy and just kind of looked at him and was like, he goes, losing isn't about where you're at. It's about how you carry yourself and how you go about preparing yourself. That's how you become a winner, not where you're geographically or standing at the time. I bring that up because Chuck Noll was hired. The Steelers basically, and look, I hate the Pittsburgh Steelers. I got friends that love them. I love mocking them, as you guys know. I got my best friend still wants to fight me for what I said about him on this podcast about rooting for the Browns. Rob's still pissed off at me, and that's fine. That was where the Steelers were, and I don't have the exact date or year that Chuck Noll was hired. But if you guys know your history, Chuck Noll was hired, turned them into the dynasty that they were in the 70s, 80s. Then they went to Bill Cowher, and now they're at Mike Tomlin. They are thought of as one of the best organizations in the world because of how they win, because of how they give back in their community, because of what their owners, the type of people that their owners are. They are one of the crown jewels of the NFL, right? Are they going through some weird stuff right now, and they're going through dealing with some players that are full of themselves? Absolutely. But as an organization, it hasn't cracked in decades. And as an organization, it was looked at as bad or worse than what the Cleveland Browns have looked like over the last 4 or 5 years. So you can change it with the right hiring of people and the right people and by winning. So those are the big things. Like, to me, I read that quote, and as I read that story today about the Browns, and I'm not saying Freddie's going to become Chuck Noll. I'm not saying that at all. But sometimes when you get that right guy and get the right quarterback and you win some games, a lot of the things that people like to make these hit-em-up type stories on, they don't matter. Like, what's happened to me with Antonio Brown, whatever it is, I think that's his name, right? Yeah, it's a big deal right now. He didn't show up that week. It was very childish and immature, and he still keeps putting up childish stuff on Instagram. He won't call his teammates back. He's being a prima donna, a jackass. But if the Steelers continue doing what the Steelers have done, that's just going to be a blip on the screen, and they move on. Santonio Holmes was a hard guy to deal with. Like, I can go through a plethora of players that they were just like, all right, our time's up. We tried, and they keep winning. And I keep saying, when Ben Roethlisberger doesn't limp and cry and bitch and moan and walk out as their quarterback, that's when I'll worry about the Steelers not being able to win.
Yeah. Look, here's my takeaway. Not from the story, because I honestly, at this point, I've only skimmed the Seth Wickersham story. I've seen some of the excerpts that have been out there. I've been listening to the radio for at least sitting in the airport earlier and then getting home. All of this. guys, here as fans, as writers, as talkers, following the Browns forever, we've had our own perceptions, and you can be sensitive to all the Cleveland shit, every big game of ever, right? The drive, the fumble, the shot, all of that stuff that's gone on. The fact is, the Browns were the laughingstock of the NFL for a long time, and right now they're not. The reality right now is, in talking to John Dorsey this week and talking to Freddie Kitchens this week and getting back to NFL business, is they are in the process of taking these middle steps, these next steps. So even though you should sure as shit be excited about where it is and really confidently, I think, able to say we are ready to move past what was laid out on ESPN.com today, what's made every headline and every radio show in town.
For sure.
There are these steps that are important. John Dorsey had 31 new players on this team last year, and a bunch of them are pretty good, and a handful of them look like they got a chance to be great. There's still middle steps, necessary steps. These next signings, these next trades, somebody has to be great because you got to get there. You're not good enough yet, right? They want Baker away from football right now, and they should be. The rookies, what they go through is a year-round grind, and you got to get away. But when he comes back, he's got to do the right things. He's got to really get on the same page, even more so with Freddie, with Todd Monken, with whoever the new receivers are, with all of this stuff. Defense has to get fixed. They need more corners. They need another pass rusher. They need all of these things. Why did Freddie usher those other guys out of the building? Because he didn't think it was good enough, because John Dorsey didn't think it was good enough. So they are not I'm just saying, in the hoping, in the projecting, in the Twitter arguing, don't skip the next steps, the middle steps, because these are really important into getting to where everybody thinks they can go. And I think they can go too. Dre, I think, there is a real possibility, and it's lined up this way when you look at the ages of their best players. And if you think that Dorsey can even just hit B-plus drafts from here on out, right. Like they are looking at a window, right? And you're looking at sooner than later worrying about the Steelers and Ravens every move. You're looking at later than sooner worrying about Patrick Mahomes and those guys. I mean, for sure. It's just these next 2 months, and then, of course, 6 months down the road as the Browns get ready to handle this, are going to be so important in this team's overall development, and not just for this September through December, but for the years to come.
No, we said this 8 weeks ago that the window was opening. It's up to the people that they have in place now to see how far that window opens now and how long they can keep that window open. But there's no doubt with the quarterback that they have in place, with the offensive, with getting Monken in as an offensive coordinator, I've heard nothing but fabulous things about him. And when you consider what he was able to do with that offense and all the turmoil that they had going on down in Tampa, it's hard not to be excited. You bring up Patrick Mahomes, and I heard somebody say this, and I agree. I think the AFC very soon, the AFC looks like it's going to run through Kansas City, Indianapolis, and Cleveland. If not in 2019, I'd say 2020. Those are your AFC teams, and it's obvious why. You Luck, Mahomes, and then you look at Baker Mayfield, all seem like they have the chance to carry organizations on their back. And that's taking nothing away from what the guy is doing in New England. But I don't know how much longer he can do it. God bless him. I'm not going against him. I know that. I'll no longer ever go against Tom Brady. But I think at the end of the day, when you look at age and you look at talent and you think of John Dorsey, I mean, we've got a chance, and I don't want to get ahead of myself. We got a chance the next 2 or 3 years to be doing our podcast, brought to you by a bunch of great companies that I love all the love that they'll get from us. But we got a chance to talk about the John Dorsey AFC Championship game in the next 3-4 years, right?
We got a chance to be doing a podcast from a playoff location sometime in the next 3 Januaries, right?
Right, and it could be in Kansas City or it could be here, but you could say John Dorsey drafted both of these quarterbacks. John Dorsey's handprint is over both of these teams. When you look at the youth and you look at the guys that can really play in Kansas City, and you look at the guys that are going to play here and make plays here, he has a chance to put his foothold on the AFC and doing what he's done and what he's become. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean he's perfect, but he has a chance
exactly.
to do that.
Here's what I'm trying to say. Last Saturday and Sunday, while you were out in your driveways measuring the snow with White Claw like I was, it was okay to think about what the hell would happen if the Browns were about to play a big game and this kind of storm hit. Like, could you even get to the stadium? Like, what would the conditions be like? I'm just
I'm
take
glad
caution.
You said that, man.
You know, this is not negativity. It's just reality. Is that there's several steps in between. The San Diego Chargers are really fucking good, have been for a long time.
Yes, they are.
The Pittsburgh Steelers have been one of the model NFL franchises for decades. They didn't make the playoffs this year, right? Like, it's it's hard. So, Dre, one other thing. Two others, but I wanted to bring this up in terms of where the organization is and just the whole vibe. And obviously, I made note of this yesterday, about this time, actually, long before I knew the Seth Wickersham story or any of that was coming out. So 3 or 4 of us got to sit down with Freddie in the lobby at the Senior Bowl and just kind of talk about his staff, talk about what the last 3 weeks have been like, just kind of ask him whatever. He and I did not really talk about my visit to his hometown because he was being paged by John Dorsey, and he takes precedence over Zach Jackson. But during this, I basically asked him if this is sunk in yet. And the reason I'm going to read this whole answer is because this goes back to years of A to Z conversation about majoring in the minor, about what you can do as a coach. You know, he's got to worry about the quarterback and using the challenges right, and managing the games. And I mean, if we learned anything, yes, Tom Brady's great and you shouldn't bet against him. But if you learn anything, it comes down to a couple plays. If D4 doesn't jump off sides, how great is Tom Brady? Well, he's still fucking great. But, right?
And in the Super Bowl, though,
you know, and if you guys think sweating those games in September, 2 of them went to overtime and the other 2 went to the buzzer was crazy. Like, you know, what's it going to be like if that happens in January? So I asked Freddie if it sunk in yet, and he said, quote, "Yeah, but it's sunk in from the standpoint of, like, let's work. I'm ready to get our staff together. I'm looking forward to us getting together as a complete staff for the first time because I know that begins the process of building what we're building and where we're going. It's sunk in that way. I have to be the one to tell the other guys when to be there, but other than that, it's the same. You know, every job in our organization is important. The kitchen crew is important. The field crew is important. Everybody is important, and they have to understand that. From that standpoint, I can do a good job of making everybody understand they're important, and they will. They are needed, and they need to be supported as well. At the end of the day, I'm still a football coach, and the part that sunk in is I have to make sure everybody's there Monday to get started. And again, this doesn't mean that Freddie's going to be a hit. It doesn't mean that he's going to win a Super Bowl. But I think that's the right perspective. Obviously, there's a pecking order in every organization. And obviously, there's some more important than others and some that believe they're more important than others. And obviously, the third person on the kitchen crew isn't going to be able to get 20 minutes with Freddie Kitchens on a Thursday in game week if it really needs it, right?
Right.
But
I like it because he said at the end of the day. So he's with the Andre Knox fan club just went up.
Yeah, and look, I just think it is that, Dre. I really think I don't care what kind of job or company you got. If somebody's job's not important to some level, then why are they doing it? You know? And we all get caught up in status and where we want to go and who we know. And just being at the Senior Bowl all week, it is the ultimate swinging dick testosterone competition. Who I know, right? Who am I? How much money do I make?
Right.
Who do I work for? Who gives me the biggest hugs? It is so. I mean, I'm so glad to get out of there. Quite honestly, as fun as it is, right? But I just think like culture is setting that over time, right? And so many things have to go right for John Dorsey and for Freddie Kitchens to stay in place. But I think these are true football guys. They're grounded guys as humans. They're different. But finally, you kind of have a marriage to where Dorsey chose him, to where they worked together. I don't think either side really forced this thing. I think the fact that you couldn't break him and Baker up happened organically. Yes, it happened fast, and it happened against mostly bad teams, but I don't think you could derail that train. And I just think that's really important. And I just wanted to make sure I read that as my next to last Browns thought as we move along, talk about James Harden and whatever else.
James Harden, good Lord. I still say Kobe would average 50 in all those games in a row. I don't want to be the old guy that hates, but I know I'm going to sound like that. What James Harden is doing is tremendous. It's phenomenal. But the defensive game has changed. And all I keep thinking, and you know this, every time Harden does it, and I don't want to be the old guy hating it. I know I just keep thinking I would love to see Kobe Bryant play right now. And with an offense that rolls him the ball and says, hey, get high screen and rolls and make your decision. Like last night, Harden had 20 4, I believe, free throws. I could be off 1 or 2.
Yeah, it's close.
Regardless.
It's close.
Yeah. But, I mean, that's what used to happen with big men, right? Like, big men used to get that many free throws. Like, it's unbelievable. I'm having fun watching it. I don't want to come off as, like I said, I don't want to come off as a hater towards this. I love watching it. I love seeing history being made. And I guess it's just the way we are as fans nowadays that we instantly compare. We've talked about this with LeBron, and they're always wanting to compare him and Jordan and how it's just unfair. And what you really do is you take away from the moment that is. And I don't want to do that. Harden deserves what he's doing. He's going to win the MVP off of this probably, again. But I keep going back to is I would love to see Kobe get to play in this type of a setting that we have right now in the NBA. Because and part of this is Harden's they're hurt. The Rockets are all beat up. They got behind the 8 ball early in the season and didn't win games. And the West is so damn tight that you got to win all the games you can get. You can't coast. And speaking of that, I brought up injuries and LeBron's name has been brought up. You know what I texted you on Christmas Day when LeBron went down, and now this is the longest he's ever sat out in his career. And look, what the Cavs have going on as basketball, as a basketball product, is what it is. I've had a chance to go to about 5-6 games as a non-media person, and I can't tell you one relevant moment from any of them other than sitting on the court side and just reading the backside of the head coach of the Utah Jazz's back. Is about all I can really tell you. And how he cussed out an official real nicely. That was the coolest part, but I couldn't tell you anything on the court that blew me away. Because culturally, the Cavs have a big problem in my estimation. But, and I don't want to be revisionist in this, you knew all the miles LeBron put on his body that injuries were due to, because we all know what's undefeated. There's 2 things. And if you listen to this podcast, you know him well. I think we almost added a third a couple weeks ago. But I just think this is the beginning of nagging injury USA for LeBron. And imagine if he would have stayed in the condition that the Cavs are in, just player-wise. Could you imagine what radio would be like? You have guys, what radio would be like here in Cleveland if LeBron was here and missed basically a full month of games, and not just because he was taking a vacation to go to Florida because he hated everybody. We would be freaking out. And,
well,
the East.
But
go ahead.
I would say this. The Lakers are so young and the West is so competitive that they can't afford to do it. I mean,
no.
If the LeBron-led Cavs got in the East as the 8, you would still think they could win it, right?
No doubt.
Now the Lakers, hell, I might have wagered on them to miss the playoffs, and I might be feeling pretty good about it, quite frankly.
I heard something crazy yesterday, as you should. I heard something crazy yesterday, though. They're like 4.5 games out of being like the 2 seed.
Yes.
And they're like four games out of being like the last seed in the West. Like that's how crazy.
It's a very competitive league, except for the Bulls, the Suns, and the Cavs. It really is.
Yes.
That's my high level NBA observation.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, because we haven't talked about this. I mean, we could probably. I know it's Thursday. Maybe we'll get together and do something again before Sunday or Friday. We could probably do another one tomorrow. What did you take from the? See, this is why I missed you. God, I just said that. Erase that. Don't ever let that be heard. That's the worst thing I've ever said on this podcast. When Kyrie stepped, and you and I have a lot of talks about Kyrie, but we haven't talked about when he came out and basically apologized to LeBron last week. So I have my feelings. I want to know yours.
My feelings are that until much further notice and much further proof, Kyrie is still all about Kyrie. And even if he was genuine in saying that, he picked to do it at a time when, from where this angry old white man sits, he should have been talking about his teammates and his team and the game and the moment.
He was talking about his teammates. That's the worst part. like him saying he's apologizing to LeBron because he used to be that guy was basically putting down his own.
No, you're right.
Better.
And look, no, there was definitely subliminal messages and not so subtle ones in that. I just think, man, this dude's a weirdo. This dude's self-centered. He's an incredible talent. And the Celtics and potential other suitors of Kyrie, I don't want to say an issue. I mean, every team wants him. I mean, the Cavs gave him away. I guess more than that, I mean, my number one NBA question right now is this. Sorry to skip the Kyrie part for a second.
It's all right.
Okay, we knew that the Cavs are going to be bad, and if you were even being a little bit honest, you knew it was going to be beyond bad, right? And that's just the reality. You lost the greatest player in the game. You come off this run. There's no picking up the pieces, and anybody that was thinking 35 wins and sneaking in was just flat out delusional, right? That's what it is. But what's a lot bit scary, Dre, is that it's hard to see a plan. It's hard to see that internally they didn't think, or that they did think differently. And I guess my question going forward, and we can do more of this after the trade deadline and as the season winds to its miserable end, is as you go forward, Zion or no Zion, the kid from Murray State, not the kid from Murray State, can you possibly let this administration go forward?
No. I'll let you. You don't got to finish. No. They have zero culture. That's all. They have zero culture to build upon. Everybody's getting excited for the ping pongs and trying for Zion or anybody else. I think they're in a bad position. And this is me personally, in my opinion, and like you said, we can get into this more later because I do want to ask you just a little bit about the AFC and NFC championship games before we get out of here. I think, this is just my opinion, I think there are people that are in that building at the Q as it's getting rebuilt that feel like, well, LeBron changed our culture and was able to take us to the finals for 8 times or 5 times, 6 times, whatever. That's different. It took him going to Miami to figure out how to even make a culturally winning type of organization. As part of the reason he left the first time. You can't bring a 19, 20-year-old and think just suddenly because he's the best talent in the draft, it's going to change the culture of an entire organization. They need to look hard and deep, in my opinion, at the organization, how they go about cultivating talent. Have they helped Sexton at all from the day that they let the head coach leave to the guy that's just the voice of the team? When I look at Sexton, and it's not all Colin Sexton's fault. He's 20 years old or 19. I just think that I think it's a sad story that we're all sitting here believing, okay, ping pong balls. You get the number 1 pick, you get the number 2 pick, then everything becomes great. Be careful with that, people. The Minnesota Timberwolves right now have 2 number 1 picks in Andrew Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns. And we all know the craziness that went on at the beginning of the year with them and Butler. They're not even a 500 team. Yeah, they're in the West, but they have 2 number 1 picks that are really good players. Sacramento has
and
lost
aren't kids
for years,
anymore either.
And aren't kids anymore. Thank you. Sacramento is finally turning around. They still got turmoil in their organization, which is crazy. That's a whole other story as well. I can just give you a lot of teams that have number 1 overall picks or have top 4 or 5 picks, and they still can't win. Remember, the Cavs, when LeBron left the first time, had Kyrie and Tristan Thompson. You may laugh, but Tristan Thompson was a top 4 draft pick, and Deion Waiters, who was the 4th overall pick in the draft. Just because you get picks in the top 3 or 4 does not mean that culturally your organization changes. They have an organizational problem with the Cleveland Cavaliers. So I pause at what we're watching because I feel like this may become the norm sooner than later.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple realities. One, Dre, is that, the ping pong balls are going to be an extent of it, and it probably is going to be a multi-year rebuild, right? There's more to it than that, but that seems to be the way that you have to go when you're a small market team, right? When you go to the bottom, you'd almost rather be at the bottom than in the middle. But the problem is, even if you change the guy who makes the pick by title, you're not changing the owner. And when I talk about lack of a plan, extending Kevin Love was a PR move. It was not part of a basketball plan, right?
Right.
You're right. You cannot kill Colin Sexton right now because he's a kid playing a man's game for a terrible team that's changed coaches and has no plan. So does it look like that Colin Sexton is going to be a multi-time All-Star and eventually be that? No, but I mean, he is 60 games into his career, so you have to at least keep 50 games. Keep the brake pedal handy with that. It just seems like instead of saying, okay, we had this year and a half that we had to go through this, it seems like internally they're shocked and don't know the next step, and that's bad. That's how you become the Sacramento Kings, right? Who have collected some good players, who have made some moves, but still they took Marvin Bagley over fucking Luka Doncic. So,
could you imagine them with Luka? Imagine them with that. And that became a problem in their organization. That was a fight. That was the fight between the head coach and the general manager. Now the assistant general manager got kicked out of practice. Like I said, if you culturally aren't set and as one as an organization, kind of plays into our conversation earlier about the Browns, right? No matter what happens on the field, if you don't have the culture set right, it becomes very difficult to win in any league, in any business.
Yeah, and it's hard in pro sports. And sometimes it can be one guy walking in that door. We know with the Cavs it was LeBron James, right? He was the culture.
Right. Right.
You know, maybe with the Browns it will be Baker Mayfield and then the other guys to follow, and we'll see. It's exciting times. It's interesting times. One thought on the NFC Championship game in particular, and you guys know we say this. I am never one play, about one play, one sequence determining a game. And Sean Payton absolutely left that door open by throwing the ball on first down. And I know Drew Brees made an uncharacteristic bad throw, and I know 2 plays later on the biggest fucking play of your season, you're going to Tommy Lee Lewis. But that is such a blatantly missed call that there is no defending it. And that's before you get to the magnitude, the scope, everything of where you are, third down NFC Championship game, all of that stuff. Right. And that, Dre, is just so bad. And although, you know, all the whining in New Orleans has come off as tiresome and awful, I get it. I mean, the Saints, they did it to themselves last year by keeping the door open for a once-in-a-lifetime play. And then this year, again, I'm never, ever that person. But, man, there is just no atoning, no excusing that. It's as bad as it gets.
Couple things off of that. I agree. One play doesn't make or break a game. I'll take you to task on one thing. And this is no hate. This is just watching games, and you know this. Drew Brees, as you said, uncharacteristically had a terrible throw on first down, and you instantly tweeted, that's bad. You called it out right away. Before the penalty or the non-penalty call, you tweeted, it was like, that's bad. You run the ball. But with Drew Brees, you changed it because he can do what he can do. You trust him. So I don't kill the coach for that. Drew Brees' arm the last month of the season was not the same arm that we've saw most of his career. He was short on a couple throws. He was short on a couple throws 2 weeks before, in the week before this game this past Sunday. And look, he's 40. I'm not. He's a man. More respect. He's a man. Yeah. I mean, and like I said, I'm not saying this to kill him, but I think as a coaching staff, they averaged, I think, 19 points a game last 6 weeks of the season. They were not that explosive team. Part of that was Michael Thomas is a great number one receiver. They never had a number two. Ted Ginn Jr. comes back late. He missed Ted Ginn on a deep pass early in the game. Like, I'm just saying, if you watch closely, his arm just wasn't the same. Maybe that's another reason why they should have ran the football. But they're a really good team, and it plays into what you just said. You can be really good and not win a championship if everything doesn't go just right. Yeah. The last 2 years, has there been a team that you'd rather not be than that New Orleans Saints team? And they don't have they don't even have they don't even got an NFC championship ring to take from it. Like, you know,
I was certain they were going to win last year's Super Bowl, and then when I saw what the Eagles did to the Patriots, I knew it. This year, I think, Dre, in their last 7 games, I think they scored more than 23 points one time. The Saints.
Right. Yes.
With what's perceived to be, you know, with arguably the best receiver in the game, certainly a top 5 guy, and what's perceived to be one of the greatest home field advantages in the game as well. And something wasn't clicking.
The other thing I will say, though, and I have to say this, we needed a bad, and you may not agree with this. I love NFL football, like most people are listening to this. We've just witnessed one of the worst seasons of refereeing ever. Not just in the championship game and that call that was missed. And number one, that could have been like 3 penalties. It was helmet to helmet. It was pass interference. Like how? And like people are like, well, put more officials out there. No, there were 2 guys within 10 yards of the play. The NFL basically have rushed and this is my opinion, they've rushed all their great officials out because of all the head-to-head rules and everything else and how they grade them. They've got to get Blandino back. They've got to get Mike Pierre back. They got to get somebody with some balls, and they got to fix this because this year, just look at the Browns games that we watched and the bad and remember, I'm the guy that always comes out and says, hey, I don't want to blame a referee for a win or a loss. I'm not built like that. I don't like having those conversations. But with 1 game left, they have to fix the referee problem, whether it's paying them more, whether it's getting more quality people, whether it's backing off guys after they make mistakes. They've got to find a better quality guys to make these calls, because if they can't, it brings too many questions to the table at the end of the day of what's going on. And with gambling becoming more and more prevalent and more out in the open, which I totally agree that it should be, you're always going to have those people on the conspiracy level going, was that guy in on the take? And I don't think
right there. I mean, there's two officials who you're right, who can make two calls. One, the most blatant pass interference you've ever seen, and two, an obvious targeting even if you don't call pass interference. Two of them. Right. I got a real problem with being able to challenge that, because human error is a part of life, not just a part of these games. But also, even if you have that system, it wasn't called pass interference, so I'm not sure you could challenge it. We can't get to a point where you go back and watch every play. Right? No,
but you could put something. You're right, but you could put something in for under 2 minutes left in the game. Right?
That's like this.
That's the only thing.
So the way I used to drive to work a long time ago when I worked for the Browns, there was some back roads, and you got to a point where you could go one of three different ways that all put you out the same way. So just because I am the ADD poster child, even if I wasn't behind a big truck or even if I wasn't in a hurry, sometimes I would just mix it up, right, just for my own pleasure.
Right.
Two of the ways you came up and you went through a four-way stop, and then you went another 500 yards and it brought you to a light. Well, one of the ways you kind of wound around and went down a hill, and how it was set up, it was like a three-way stop, but you could see all around. So it was the most optional stop sign in the world. And then you wound back around another mile, and then you came out to 18 further down the road. So I'll never forget, it was a Friday morning. It was a sunny morning. For whatever reason, I took that way. I rolled up to the three-way stop. I looked. There was nobody around. I rolled through it like I did 80% of the time. And like I said, I was 110% sure that I was in no danger or putting no one in any danger. And then, like 700 yards down the road, I get pulled over. And the guy says, well, what's up? And I said, I don't know. And he said, you know why I pulled you over? And I genuinely had no idea, because I was so far past that, right, that I had forgotten.
Right.
and you just, it comes down to, yes, I was the dumbass, and it was way back there, but you have to let this stuff play out. Like, you cannot. And I guess you open this can of, I guess what I'm trying to say is you open this can of worms the first time you institute any replay. And then with all the technology and, like you said, all the stakes and all the importance and all the eyeballs, you want to use all that. You want to do it. But at some point, like, you have to count on the Freddie Kitchens quote, you have to count on those people to do their jobs. And every one of those officials has an important job. And they're not always going to be right. And every player and coach has to know that. But in the NFC Championship game with 1:30 left and the whole season at stake and a blatant pass interference and targeting 2 feet in front of 2 officials, you can't miss that. Yeah. And those officials should be fired, and the head of officiating should be fired as well.
I agree. I tweeted out after the end of the AFC Championship game, sums up the season, and I don't have it verbatim, but basically I said bad officiating, overtime, and Tom Brady. That wraps up the 2018-2019 season for me.
Yeah.
Because you go through all the season, and I'm just thinking of Browns games, but I'm just thinking overall. The one thing I'd take away from it, overtime was more prevalent than ever before, bad officiating. And we all sat around, and this is something I got to give Belichick a lot of credit for, man. They built up a run, and we'll talk Super Bowl as we get closer. They built up a great running game to almost protect Tom Brady all season long, right?
Yes.
Their running backs are interchangeable. They use them perfectly. Like, you don't even know the difference when White's in the game or the white guy or Michelle. They use them so perfectly. Their offensive line is phenomenal. They're playing a left tackle, pennies to the dollar compared to what most left tackles are getting. They protected Brady, and hell, if they continue with this game plan, and for as bad as the AFC East is, Brady really might play till he's 45 because he hasn't been hit all playoffs long. I mean, we can go back and forth. I think it was a bad officiating call there. You can't line up offsides though, D Ford. And great job. And Belichick did what Belichick does so well. He held down that Kansas City offense just long enough to get the hell out of there with the victory.
Yeah.
For so long, I've hated Belichick and the Patriots. I can't hate them anymore, man. I got a true respect for what they put out there.
You know what, Dre? It doesn't come. It rarely ever comes down to one play, because with stops in the first half, they won that game, right? They set up the ending with stops in the first half because they got to a point they couldn't stop them. I think you look ahead and you're a Browns fan, you sure as shit hope you play the Patriots next September, because every year they prove to us time and again they just don't care about September. Right. They scrimmage, they get their way through. They're practicing for the Super Bowl. They have 0 players on their injury report. They're one of the oldest teams in the league. It's week 21.
And they still are going.
They have 0 players on their injury report. I think they know what they're doing.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? I looked at that too, and I was like, how do they have no one hurt right now? That is amazing to me.
Gronk missed time. Tom's older than you. Burkhead missed half the year. Michelle missed a month. Josh Gordon is no longer with them. Like, it goes on, and Cordell Patterson missed time during the year. It goes on, and the McCourty brothers are our freaking age, for God's sake. You know? It goes on and on and on. A couple of programming notes. As Dre mentioned, guys, we were away for 2 weeks. We don't expect you to listen to every podcast or certainly every word of every podcast, but we told, as much as we appreciate the tweets and the where are you guys, we told you. When I got to go on these trips, I can't bring this equipment. And just like the truth's in the middle on sports, like, it does, although you guys whine too much, it does sound like shit when I have to use that headset. It's just not good anymore. So, like, we'd rather just not do a podcast in most cases, especially because I was on to where I didn't have a schedule. And one of these years, we'll be able to both go to the Senior Bowl and bring you interviews and do all sorts of things. And truth is, we'll probably be too drunk to record, but we'll sure as shit have fun on getting the way there.
You'll be entertained. You'll be entertained. Don't worry.
So I want to ask you 2 things. 1, how many days of spring training? And 2, haven't we arrived at the time of the year where the lucky winner of the auction at your alma mater gets dinner with Andre Knott and all sorts of stories?
You're such an ass. Yeah, I actually have 2 of those dinners this week. Friday night, Saturday night. I have one from St. Me, and I got one from my wife's benefit that a person won. That I'm going to do Saturday night, so that'll be fun. It's dinner with Dre weekend, basically.
We be eating good.
We be eating good. I'll be telling stories. That's my back time. That's my side job. I go out and just tell stories. That should be fun. As a matter of fact, you know what? Next year we're going to pair off a night with A to Z, so I can make your ass be involved in it too.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, spring training is today is what, the 20? What is today? Today is the 24th. Oh, yeah, a month from now, I'll be in Arizona. I leave next week for the Bahamas. Family trip to the Bahamas next week. Then I come back, and then I'll be around for a couple of weeks. I'll do my routine of going around and seeing local high school baseball teams. I'll check out my Fighting Irish and Coach Borman. David Lee Morgan's got me going down to see Massillon Tigers baseball team as well. I'll try to get you a hat, but I know you can get one because you got neighbors that frequent that school. And then, last weekend of February, we'll do our first game on television. Unbelievable to say that. I'll come back home for a couple of days, and then I think March 1st or 2nd, I travel back to Arizona, and I won't be back until the first week of the season. So we are at that point of the year, unbelievably, but we still got some plans for some. I got a plan for something else. I won't say it on this part. I'll talk to you later.
Well, we got during the downtime, we did work on a couple things that we're excited about. So we have barely had time to talk to one another about details, so we're not going to share those on the air. But listen, guys, honestly, we try to say this. We probably don't say it enough. We appreciate the listens, the tweets, the shares, the word of mouth, as much little human interaction as we do in today's day and age of helping this thing grow, of telling people about it. We have fun when we do it. We really do try to do it twice a week, even more when we can. And so with Dre going back on vacation, I should be home for the next few weeks. We will sit down and sort it out, both from the business side of what we're working on and when we can do this again. We will talk Super Bowl. We'll talk Super Bowl props. We'll continue to talk about the exciting future for the Browns and what the hell the Cavs are doing. Eventually, we'll talk college hoops because I'm really into that. We'll talk about what we eat at the Super Bowl. Oh, here's what I wanted to ask. This is more for last week.
Big man.
What's that?
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm in love with Tennessee's basketball team, not because they're number one. I've been watching them all year. You can tell people. I was texting last night about Tennessee Vandy at halftime. I love their big dude. Williams is truly Corliss Williamson for me. Big dude with a nice touch. Hit 20-some free throws last night. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, first of all, driving in Alabama yesterday, I was listening to Feinbaum take calls about Tennessee women's basketball, so it's a little different in the South. I love it. I love, Dre, the passion. And I'm so happy for our friends that do full-time radio here now that the Browns are actually NFL relevant and not just making fake conversation all the time. But I love the passion in the South for college sports. I really do. And how it's not just Feinbaum's the one we know now because he's made a dynasty and made the biggest show and been doing it for years. But you can get all college football talk all the time, and I love it. I'm a nerd for it. I'm not as into it as I used to be. And I'll tell you one reason I don't know as many, in addition to being old and actually having real-life responsibilities, you used to know college football players because of that PlayStation game. And
absolutely.
They have dropped the ball on that, man. They really. I remember buying on eBay the memory card where someone put the rosters in, and then I would either split it with my friends or then I'd turn around and make a copy and sell it to them, and we would all have that. That was awesome stuff. So
I got a funny. As we were talking, I was looking on Instagram. Is it foul for someone to like someone's mom's pictures and their daughter's pictures? Because a friend of ours has done it, and he'll remain nameless for now. And I'm like, damn, dog, you can't be that thirsty. You can't. I can't wait to tell you. I can't wait to show you. I love us. I love us. Oh my God. I'm like, you can't like both, son.
I think we're too late to go into much of a detail of an Instagram conversation. So,
I want to do it like one day. I think I'm gonna open up and we're just gonna do a social media, just like things that I pick up on that people do, and it's like you can't be that thirsty, people. Oh, the other thing I gotta say, because I gotta get my daughter here quickly in a couple minutes. I don't hate Tony Romo. I think Tony Romo does a fantastic job, but some of the things he does, and you guys are making him into being the next best coach ever, or being a coach. There's a lot of guys that can do what he does. He is in the right place at the right time with the right producers and the right directors that are allowing him to do the game the way that he's doing it. But calling plays out before the snap, I know probably 100 guys that can do that.
Okay.
Now, have a lot of guys done that on television? No, because usually producers and directors want to tell storylines and have you talk about the players, and they want to give you tales of tape. But they don't want that to happen. And I'll say this, where I'll give Romo credit. Romo's not afraid to be wrong on national television. A lot of guys can do it, and this is where maybe I'm going against myself, because I'm being honest. I just can't believe when I see Stephen A. Smith and so many other people going, teams need to talk to him. No, any football mind. Bernie Kosar has done it for years. Like, hell, you've sat with me at games where I can tell you half the plays that are coming. If you know distance down and what teams are trying to do, figuring out the play call isn't that difficult, especially on 3rd and 10. If it's, I want to say this a nice way. If it's your profession, you better know what the hell's coming, especially if you just came off the field. I know it's not something on television that we've seen a lot. I like Tony Romo on broadcast because of his enthusiasm for the game, his excitement for the game, his excitement and telling us why. Him calling the plays out, not that big a deal to me. It's just not at all, because I've been around guys my whole life that can do that. Like, I've sat in coaching booths. Like, when I went to the St. Pete Bookto game, it was hilarious. Like, the other team, Bookto would come out because I sat in the coach's booth. And I know, and this is how it usually is in most coaching booths. The team, in pro, college, high school, whatever, team would come out and they would line up, and instantly one of the coaches would tell you to play within 3 seconds, because that's what you do when football is what you sleep, drink, and eat. It's not that difficult, people. That's all I'm saying. It's not that difficult.
I would say that presentation matters. And this is what I tell you every time you tell me that I'm a grammar nerd and I correct your spelling on Instagram or on Twitter, right? Presentation matters.
Right.
And I think this is just to me, because I know a little bit about football. You know a little bit about football. You guys listen and know a little bit about football. We all watch it differently. We all consume it differently. We all care about different things. I feel like Tony Romo does it. I think the one thing that he does is talk too much. But the one thing he never does is talk down to you as a viewer. I think the presentation, it's so natural in conversation, and he's nailed the timing on when he's done it. I could watch and listen to him do every game. I really could. I just think
we can do right.
It's so much more comfortable with him. And I mean, going back years and years since I was old enough to watch football, that's how I've learned a lot about the game, is listening to these guys who know tons more about the game than us. I just think the way Tony presents it to both the casual and casual plus viewer is not condescending. It's smooth. And even though it's wordy, it's right what I want, and I enjoy the shit out of it.
You just hit the nail on the head. He doesn't talk down to people, and I think he does because other guys. I think, like, to me, Rich Gannon would tell you plays too, but it probably was too. It was too football work, like too football nerdy. You just hit on why I think it works, and I'm glad we had this conversation. Romo says it to you in the most elementary way possible, right? He says they're going to throw over the middle. They're going to chip this guy, and they're going to throw the ball over the middle to Edelman. And people are like, holy shit, he just called the play. Where a guy like Gannon would be like, you got two safeties high. They got to find a way to work those safeties out of the play. Where some people are like, for some people, if they hear that, they're like, okay, I don't see the two safeties high. And what does he mean they have to work them out of the play? Where you just made a great point. You made a great point. He does present it in a very, very easy way for the common folk to understand what he's saying.
So presentation matters, so start spelling a little better on Instagram. We got to learn the difference between worst and worst. We got to.
Hey, F-U-C-K. You got that one?
I mean, listen. I talked about my short attention span, right? We know that there's only a few things I've ever cared about for more than 3 weeks in my life, right? Football, beer, Jen Brady, and this grammar stuff, right? That's the only things that have ever kept my attention for like 3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
So please, with that being said, can you do me a fucking favor and start getting worse and worst right?
You are the worst. W-O-R-S-E. There's a word I want to spell right now, but I'm not going to do it.
Hey, shout out to Scene, to the Honeymoon Girl, to American Fireworks. They sponsor our Glory Days segment. Subscribe to The Athletic. Read my Freddie Kitchens story. Press the purple podcast button. Download. Go back. I don't know if it'll be in 24 hours or in 48. With no football this weekend, we'll figure it out. We're glad you stuck with us during our break. We're refreshed. We're ready. We'll talk to you next time on A to Z, because when you brought it up, Dre, when you said Tony there, I thought you were going to say Tony Grossi, and we were going to have to talk about social media, but you said Tony Romo. So maybe we'll do that on the next one. For Andre, I'm Zach. Talk to you next time on A to Z.
Konnichiwa, America.